Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So I am going to call this special meeting of the Kent Planning and Zoning Commission of Thursday, November 2nd, 2023 to order. The roll call I just did informally, I'll do now. It's myself and Alice and Wes and Adam and Daryl, regular members, and Anthony as our alternate. If we decide to make any motions, then I'll elevate, we'll elevate Anthony later if we need to, but for now we'll just start the conversation. And Anthony, feel free to jump in and comment as you will. And the one order of business that we have on the agenda tonight is the review of the draft subdivision regulations. So with that, if it's okay with you, Ty, I'll turn it over to Glenn.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Mr. Chalder, thanks for being here.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Based on our conversation at prior meetings, the commission instructed me to go ahead and get comments from Mike Ziska, Denise Lord, Rick Osborne, and Ty in terms of taking another look through the regulations in case they had any questions or comments. A number of comments came back, particularly from Mike Ziska. What I prepared for the commission was material that organized all of the comments so we could kind of go through them. I think a number of the comments were very helpful, very informative, very instructive. So in the table, which I prepared for the commission, it's a format I think you saw before on the POCD and other materials over the years. The comments are in each of the rows. And in the right-hand margin are some possible options for the commission's consideration. One category is make the change, and this is an indication that somebody's identified something that would improve and enhance the regulations. And so suggestion is for the commission to go ahead and authorize those changes. Some of the suggestions I might recommend a tweak in wording or some other provision that I think, again, make the change, but amend it slightly. There are some items that are marked as no change, but there are others that are marked discuss with the PZC. And I think that's the area, those categories where I would suggest we may spend most of our time this evening, just so that I can get feedback from the commission. I think the next step would be to, following tonight's meeting, to prepare the set of regulations that the commission can take a look at one more time, or as many times, I guess, as they feel necessary. We can go ahead then perhaps and schedule that for public hearing. I think if the commission is ready, we'll start going through these page by page, line by line in some cases. My tendency would be to move over the make change comments. But if you find something in there that you're concerned about or you'd like to discuss, please put your hand up and slow us down. I think with the yellow boxes, there's probably enough here to keep us chatting for a while. So that would be my proposed approach. Does that sound okay to everybody?
That's good.
All right.
Yes.
So
May I
I'll
ask a quick question, Glenn, before you
Of
get
course.
going? Because I didn't understand something. In the meeting folder, my first part says subdivision regs input. And when you open that up, it's pictures of the Kogut property.
Adam, that's if you go in there now, it's different. It's been updated. I think the wrong file was in there earlier, so I just did that. So
Okay.
so Glenn, if you would give us a minute to open
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
up
So
individually.
hopefully what you see is something that is not getting into focus there. Okay, it's not going to work.
Nope.
You want me
But
to
it-
share it?
I can share. Why don't I do that? If so,
See,
then
now what you said makes sense, because I went through the regulations and I didn't see any of that stuff that you said. There wasn't a response. There weren't choices, make a change. And I'm like, gosh, I'm really dense.
You're
No,
how
you're
come I'm
not,
looking at
Adam.
Kogut property. What?
So
All right, so
So,
just,
so what are we supposed to be looking at? The subdivision regs, right? Draft?
no,
That-
hang on a second here. So,
The input, Alice.
the
Oh,
very,
the input one. Okay. All
Yeah.
right, thanks. That's what I figured. Okay.
so let me get back here. Share screen. So it's a document that's called Comments List on, I think it's SR subdivision regulations, and it should look like this document. Does that look familiar to everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so let me just make this bigger here. So this is the explanation, if you will, in terms of what I wanted to, hang on for a second. Let me make it even bigger. Go. So this is what I was explaining before is, again, we're sort of got line items in the table. There's 4 categories. My tendency is going to be to assume that make change and no change are sort of default unless the commission has an issue or problem or question with this. Modify change, I think, is like make change with perhaps some tweak to it. And I think most of our discussion tonight would be on the yellow boxes, which is discussed with PZC. I think the file is in the agenda folder, so if you want to grab that and read ahead, you certainly can as we move on. So I think we're going section by section and page by page. The very first issue is in section 1 of the regulations. This is a little bit complicated, so what I'd rather do is kick this to the end of the meeting rather than get bogged down in this at the beginning.
Good idea.
So that would now put us into section 2 of the regulations. There's some observations here from Mike Ziska about changes to be made in terms of the definitions or some additions or modifies there too. The major area here for discuss with the commission is that in the definition of lot, Mike suggested to remove the words from a larger tract of land. And Mike and I have agreed to disagree on this one, which I wanted to bring to the commission's attention. The statutes talk about a subdivision being the division of a tract or parcel of land into 3 or more parts or lots. So in this usage, the word parcel is sort of the parent, and lots are sort of the children or the lots being created. I've been through the regulations. The words are used consistently in that way. It's consistent with the state statutory construct. And so I don't think there's a need to put larger tract of land. But the word tract also appears in the statute. So we could, we should leave that language in, larger tract of land, because that's what's in the statute. Thoughts from the commission?
it's kind of by default, isn't it? I mean, if you're going to divide something into a number of lots, it's obviously from a larger tract of land.
And that is what the definition in the statute says. And that's why I recommend that the regulations have been constructed that way. The use is consistent throughout. And I would suggest we just go with the terminology the way it's been configured here.
What was his reasoning to change it? Did he say?
He indicated that he felt that the concept of a larger tract of land wasn't necessary. I don't have Mike's correspondence in front of me at the moment. Yeah, I don't have it in front of me at the moment.
Okay.
Sure why I don't, where I put it. Are we good?
I don't
Yes.
see any purpose in taking it out, it seems. If it's being used in the statutes and everything else, why not
Got it.
leave it? I don't think it makes a difference really either way.
Does it
Um,
just open, does it just open a discussion if this was ever any controversial issue to define what a tract is as opposed to a lot or a parcel, or is tract defined somewhere?
Well, the statutes use the word tract. So I think that the regulations have the provision up front, which says that if a word isn't defined specifically, that the commission can refer to other references. And one of those references is the Connecticut General Statutes as may be amended. So they've got the word tract in there. I think
Yeah.
we're pretty okay. It's a
Yeah,
fairly
yeah.
common word.
Okay.
And to Anthony, to answer your question, Attorney Ziska does not give a lot of, he doesn't give any reason why. He simply is going through several definitions, and for lot, he simply says it's a bullet point, and then lot in parentheses, I'm sorry, in quotation marks, and then he said, I would remove the words from a larger tract of land without any explanation. So I'm okay with what Glenn is suggesting as well, that we leave it as written.
Okay.
Is there any other questions, comments on page 2 of the report? So that would be comments 1 through 7. So the next page is the definition of road. Mike suggested a modification, and I think his recommendation is a reasonable one. I was reluctant to use the word arteries because often in the POCD and elsewhere, we talk about arterial roads. So arteries might create some confusion. So suggested routes and the movement of vehicles, which may include pedestrians, and do that. Mike was okay with the proposed modification here. So I think we're okay with that.
Yes.
And then I think that's the other comments for section 2 are, my recommendation is to go ahead and make the changes, update the soil survey reference in the soils map. I think in resource protection to go ahead and make that change. I think there are 2 issues here, which I think it's important for us to talk about. This is on page 4 of the report. It has to do with 2 things that we've spent some time talking about with regard to conservation developments and also with the subdivision regulations. And suggesting that we modify the wording here. The regulation currently says at least 15% of the total area of the subdivision shall be set aside for open space. That's in the draft regulations I prepared. The question, I think, in the feedback overall is that it might be advantageous to word that as the commission shall not require more than 15% of the total area of the subdivision. That's the language was in the current, in your existing subdivision regulations. And that is the baseline scenario. We also would add in text which says, but an applicant may offer additional open space. And I think correlated to this is also the second one where we talked about what I refer to as a proportionality factor. And this says that land to be dedicated as open space to meet that minimum 15% requirement shall not have a greater proportion of wetlands, watercourses, steep slopes, or floodplain than the parcel as a whole. So
Yeah,
in other words, you
yeah,
can't just give us the useless land or the, you know, the non you can't just give us the constrained land. It has to be the same as the parcel as a whole. And then after that, if you want to give us more wetlands, if you want to give us water courses, steep slopes, or floodplain, you can certainly do so. You have to document and define that the minimum requirement matches the parcel as a whole. So what are your thoughts on these two?
Well, I think it's a great middle course than what we had discussed before. I like that proportional context.
And I think if the commission is comfortable with this, I think at our next meeting, we'll be talking about the conservation development regulation. And I think that this language and these criteria would be carried over to that as well.
Well, Glenn, I think I spoke up that my concern on the conservation development issues were the percent that had to be conserved. And whether it was the buildable percent or the entire property percent. I mean, if half of it's a steep cliff. So this is, as Wes just said, this is a good in between, I guess, or something, a way to address both what is nature created as the lot or the area versus the rule of what should be left undeveloped. Okay. So maybe I'm not making any sense, but.
But I think that this, what I refer to as a proportionality factor
Yeah,
is used
yeah.
in a number of municipalities.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
to address the concern that the commission raised before, that
Right.
all the commission might get in the open space set aside is wetlands, water courses, steep slopes, or floodplain, which really can't be used. And this again requires that for that 15%, you have to mimic the configuration or the
Right.
parcel as a whole.
I like it.
Got it.
I like it
How do-
also. I think it's a good in between. Everyone just has to remember that this is supposed to be a, if we make this onerous, and I don't think this is,
Mm-mm,
then we don't even need to have the regulation because nobody.
exactly.
This is
Right.
supposed to be an incentive. It's supposed to be a better way to go than doing a regular subdivision for a developer.
Right.
So this is an incentive to say, hey, let's keep some space green in your development, and in exchange, we're going to give you something. We're going to give you the ability to put in a few more lots, tighten them up. So I like this better than where it seemed like people were going, where it was just going to become so onerous, nobody would ever use it, and then there's no reason to have it.
You're right.
How does the commission feel about line 16? The commission shall not require more than 15% of the total area of the subdivision to be set aside for open space, but an applicant may offer additional open space.
Well, you can say it, but they can always do that. I mean, it's not.
They can, but I think,
I like it.
Where does that, Glenn, where does that come on when, if somebody has a good sized parcel they want to do a subdivision in, 50% of that parcel is wetlands, which they wouldn't be able to develop in the first place.
Yep.
So to say there's a 15% minimum required for open space for conservation development, I guess the rest of it.
so let me
Does
jump
that-
in, Adam. I think
Yeah.
So I think if somebody has, let's say, 100 acres and 15 acres are wetlands, that's fair, right? That's what you were suggesting? So
Or even
85% of the
larger, yeah.
parcel is non-wetland, watercourse, steep slope, or floodplain. So of that 15% or 15 acres that they need to set aside, at least 85% of it has to be non-wetland, non-floodplain, non-watercourse, non-steep slope. Okay. And then if the applicant says, well, I can't do anything with those wetlands anyway, I'll deed those to you for open space. Now our open space percentage is up to probably 20 or 25%, because it's 15%, 85% of that plus the remainder of the wetlands. And so it ends up working out to address the issues the commission raised earlier.
Okay.
So I think it's important to read 16 and 17 are in the very same section of the regulations. And it says 15% of the parcel, but of that 15%, it's got to mirror the constraints or lack of constraints on the parcel as a whole.
Okay.
Good?
Yeah.
Good.
Good.
Whoop, whoop.
Jumping ahead now to page
Good,
5.
Matt.
Go ahead.
No, it's good. It's good. I'm glad. I think we're good.
He was doing a
It was
dance
It was a
there.
little whoop whoop, you know.
Oh, okay, there you go. I was looking down. All right, I got to keep one eye on Matt. Is that the there you go.
Yeah.
You never know what's coming, but
No, there you go. Keep me guessing. So a suggestion was made by Yost for open space ownership, consider adding a conservation easement on a private lot in favor of a conservation organization. Now that would be the last choice or option. Our first choice on this that was set up is that our first choice is a nonprofit conservation organization. Actually, I apologize. We added in our first choice for open space dedication would be the town of Kent. Number 2 would be a nonprofit conservation organization. Number 3 could be a neighborhood association reviewed and approved by the commission. But if none of those are going to work, the fourth option could be a conservation easement on private parcel.
I'm not sure what that.
Mm.
I mean,
Mm.
this is a subdivision, so I guess I'm just missing. I
Yeah.
don't understand. You know, this is for a private parcel, not a subdivision.
No, it would be a subdivision of property, but we're requiring 15% of the land to be preserved as open space. In the current situation, most of the land as open space has been dedicated to the Kent Land Trust. In our discussions on this before, I think what we said was, let's put the town of Kent into the mix here in case they might want the open space either for recreation fields or to preserve open space or do something else. The second choice would be the Kent Land Trust. I think between the town and the Kent Land Trust, we're going to find somebody who is willing to take both or the open space in both of those situations. A third option, which is in your current regulations today, is a neighborhood association, which would be created to own the open space. But a fourth option could be that none of those are advantageous or beneficial. It may be a very small piece of open space in a remote location that nobody wants to manage, et cetera. And so the issue then may be a conservation restriction in favor of a conservation organization or otherwise. So it's just another flavor, I think, of open space preservation.
As long as we have options, you know, the Kent Land Trust, they're a land trust. They want to preserve the right pieces of land, not
Right.
any piece of land. And they're not
Correct.
interested in any piece of land. They're, you know, so to, and there's another land trust in town, but they think of it the same. And land trust, there's a cost to them and a requirement to them in overseeing anything. So they don't want to just take anything. So I'm hesitant to start to have in our regs that we want to designate something to a given land trust or,
Yeah, no, but I think the idea, Adam, is a sequenced list or prioritized list. So if you were being the subdivider here, the regulations would say, Adam, talk to the town first and see if they're interested in the property. Let's say the answer is no. Talk to the land trust. If you get a no there, now your next option is to create a neighborhood association. And it might be 3 landowners in a 3-lot subdivision and say, well, that really doesn't make a lot of sense. And so now the final option could be a conservation easement in favor of the town, the land trust, or somebody else. There's nothing that they have to do, but the land would be protected from development in that situation. So the situation would be that somebody has to go through the list in sequence. So they can't just pick and choose town, land trusts, either one of the land trusts or even another one if it's around, and approach it that way.
okay.
Before we go on from that idea, and I think that we should make that change as Glenn suggests. I wonder how the commission feels about in this 5A1, we specifically call out the Kent Land Trust. And as Adam says, there is another land trust that's very active in town, and there's several other land trusts in the area. And I wonder whether we should favor the Kent Land Trust or whether we should say something like such as a local land trust. You know,
I don't think we should favor one to the other. It should be a local land trust.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think we should name any given land trust or a group of them. Who knows what happens in the future? A land trust is,
Yeah, well, a land trust is a land trust.
So I'll go ahead and make that change. A local land trust is the commission's preference.
It sounds like it, yes.
Yes.
Good. Anything else on page 5?
No.
On the next page, this is a question that came up with regard to private roads, whether or not the commission is comfortable with private roads. My recollection from our discussion at the October 16th meeting is the commission was okay allowing for private roads and possibly even requiring that a proposed public road be a private road. But the requirement was that private roads be built to standards for town roads unless waived by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So this would need to meet the road specs in terms of the quality of the base, the surface, and other provisions in there for a public road. It would just be that the town doesn't own it. And then, as was pointed out by Rick, we need to add in standards for an association to be established. And that's also needed for the provisions related possibly to open space being managed by the association. So we'll go ahead and add that as well. So I just
Glenn,
wanted to go
I
ahead.
have a question for you. Because I'm hesitant to say that anybody who wants to have a subdivision, even a small subdivision, that when they build a road, that they have to build it to town specs. Because to build it to town specs there's a cost to that. And I'm not sure why, if it's going to be a private road and they're going to maintain it, why we're saying that it has to be built to town specs. There's plenty of private roads that have been built that weren't built to town specs, and they're perfectly fine roads. So that's, I'm asking, is this something that you're seeing in other towns? Do other towns require that a private road is built to the town specs in case the chance that one day the town has to take it over?
I think that's part of it. I think the other issue is in terms of ensuring that a road is adequately constructed to be able to handle emergency traffic if somebody needs to get in there. So, private road, if it's not built to, not necessarily town specifications, but let's just say sort of appropriate specifications, it could create a situation that might pose a challenge for public safety access or something else. So towns have found themselves on the horns of a dilemma here. Do we require it to be built to town standards so that in the future, if the property owners get tired of paying for private maintenance, that they might suggest or request that the town consider acquiring the road and it would be built to town standards? Or do they say the right-of-way width is 40 feet or 45 feet, and you can't make it a town road in the future because you don't have the 50 feet a town road requires, but there would still be, an accessible roadway. So I think those are the issues that I hear about most often.
So Glenn, the definition of a private road is anything less than 50 feet?
No, the definition of a private road could be, so there's two definitions of private road in the current proposed regulations. Mike Ziska suggested they both be merged. So one definition is a road which is not a state highway or an accepted town road. And the second one is a road shown on an approved subdivision plan, which is labeled private road or private street.
So Glenn, before we had, that they were standards for private roads.
Yeah,
And a private road could be a little steeper than a town road. I think the right of way was a little different as well, but the private road could not serve more than 6 lots. I
but
think
a
that was
private, but a private road always serves more than one lot, right? I mean,
6. It couldn't serve more than 6 lots.
but how few could it serve? I mean, where do you get into, maybe it's just somebody's driveway?
Well,
I'm-
driveway is- right,
I'll
but a
mention
driveway
two-
isn't a road. I mean, that's beyond that.
I'll
I
mention two private roads just for everybody to think about. And both examples that I'm going to give you are particularly difficult roads. So one is Sumner Road. And the people who live on Sumner Road, I think they like their road just the way it is, just fine.
No, I think you're right. This is a rural community. A private road is a far more rural road. So I don't know that we should ever exclude that. And I understand what Glenn's saying about the maybe at some point it has to be taken over by the town. I do get that.
But and then I would say Mountain Road, which has, I believe it has more than 6 lots off of it, and it's a steep and difficult road, and they are challenged with getting people to take care of it right now, and for all of the owners to agree about who's going to do it, because the people doing it in the past are not going to.
Yeah,
And,
I mean,
but that's for them, and that's for those landowners, and they can figure that out because they knew what they were buying when they moved there.
well, they do, because there's a public offering statement, and that and the roads and the association is within that public offering statement. So I mean, they're fully aware of what they're buying into.
So that's why I'm just a little leery about requiring roads to be town spec. We're a rural community, and it could work for a group of people or a developer who's going to develop a piece of property in a particular way.
So I believe town road specs requires it to be paved.
That, Rick, can you weigh in? Does that resonate?
I would like to be paved. I mean, we have accepted dirt ones in the past, unimproved, like Gorham Road. That one section of it, but
Yeah, that was-
normally we would ask that was paved, yes.
Okay.
But that road is a wide, pretty flat road. You know, it's not an egregious road, and I don't know that. I guess the question is, just because some private association comes to the town and says, we don't want to maintain this anymore, we would like the town to. That doesn't mean that the town has to take it, or even the town is willing to take it, unless the people on that road bring that road up to town specs. There's nothing that says that the town has or even would or wants to do that.
Okay,
Or
so
maybe
let's
nothing
ask you- I'm sorry, go ahead. Who's that?
Go ahead.
Chris?
I was gonna say there may be nothing that says it has to be, but if it goes to a town meeting, then only the residents of that road show up. They vote yes, and we have to take it. I mean,
Right.
that's could be the issue there.
So are we obligated? I mean, at the root of our charge is to provide for the health, safety, and welfare, right? And are we either obligated to be the benevolent parent to say that that's a bad decision that you all are making and you have to do this way because that's the right thing? Or do we say, listen, you can make whatever decision you want, but you're responsible for yourself. So are we responsible for others, or can we allow others to be responsible for themselves? And I think we can argue about that all night. But I think that I think that for the regulation, for the writing of the regulation, it makes sense to me to be able to allow for private roads. And when we do allow the private roads, we have to, as Glenn suggested earlier, we have to add standards that an association be established and have those be somewhat strict.
Right. So the two things that might prevent a private road from becoming a town road would be the width of the right of way, for one. I think the town road requires a certain width of right of way, and also grade. If a road is built to a certain grade and it's done, I don't know, you can't really modify that.
Can we make a regulation that says if an association wants the town to take over the maintenance of it for it to be a town road, that road has to first be brought up to town specs? I'm just thinking about what Rick said. If there was a town meeting and only the people on the road showed up and they voted for it, that kind of dumps what could be a horrible road on the town's head. And if there was I don't know if it would be a P&Z regulation or something else that said, look, if a roadway was going to become a town road that wasn't previously, that road would have to come up to town specs by the owners of that road.
So like I said, you have to do it by grade and by right of way.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great point, Wes. So the right of way needs to be, and the road doesn't have to be built to the size of the right of way, but the right of way has to exist, right?
Correct. And I think town road specs is 50-foot right of way. Rick, is that correct?
Yeah,
Yes,
go
I
ahead,
believe
Rick.
it. I think in the road regulations in this, it was also 50 feet, I think.
Yep.
And
So
then
if-
what about grade?
Well, your regulation. I
That's-
love
yeah,
10
that's in our
on every
regulation.
road in town, but we know there's a lot more than that on some.
Right.
So, I mean, our driveway regs say 15%, right?
Well, that's the driveway.
Max, yeah.
But as I recall, private roads used to be that they could be 15%. It used to be driveways were 18%. But I thought private roads were 15%. I could be wrong.
So here's what I'm going to suggest. I get the commission's feedback here that private roads could be permitted. They do not necessarily have to be built to town standards. These are subdivision regulations, so they really get their jurisdiction and control when a subdivision is being created. I don't know that the subdivision regulations are the right place to put in a limitation that says any road to be deeded to the town has to meet town specs, because the subdivision has already happened. But I think the commission's regulations can require that a note be placed on the drawing so that there is a record for all property owners in that subdivision at any time in the future that they were notified or should have been aware of the fact that the commission enabled or allowed for a private road. And at any time in the future, if this is going to be proposed for a town road, it has to be brought up to town specifications. And that's a note on the drawing.
Right. So Glenn, it used to be that all subdivisions, when they built a road, were in a sense private roads. They weren't owned, they weren't given over to the town immediately. The town accepts it later, right? That's still the case. It's would still be the case here. So there really has to be an association that it has ownership of the right of ways.
Yeah, I think Wes, in my experience in most municipalities, the declaration is made up front. And part of the reason of this gets into the financial guarantee for the road construction. And it starts to get a little trickier in terms of issuing certificates of occupancy if the improvements aren't completed, et cetera. So we set it up. It's either going to be a private road, you guys are in charge of it, or it's going to be a public road. And we have procedures and safeguards in place for that.
So as a process, does the town accept the fact that if a road is built to a town road spec, that it becomes a town road?
It's an interesting question, Wes, because I think over the years, these types of discussions and conversations have occurred as part of a subdivision process. I think Rick's input would be requested as part of a subdivision review. And there are some towns that have indicated that their desire is to have no increase in the municipal responsibility for road maintenance.
Right.
So if you come in with a new subdivision, the issue is unless it's going to meet a circulation need for the entire community, we're really not interested in that being a public road, and we're going to require you to make it a private road.
Yeah.
Create your homeowners association and take responsibility for maintenance for your 6 houses or whatever the number would be. And so the regulation proposing that would allow the commission to require a road to be a private road. If the feedback is that, you know, this town is really not interested in this little stub for 6 houses, we're not interested in maintaining that. It doesn't do much for us. The commission could require it to be a private road. But I think what I'd like to do, if it's okay with the commission, is for Rick and I to put our heads together, chat with Ty and others, and come back to you with the revised regulation here that's closer to the feedback you've given us tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And I understand that the direction really is, private roads, as Adam indicated, can have a little bit more flexibility perhaps in terms of road grade or steepness or other things like that. But again, a clear indication that this road, has a note on the subdivision drawing that, the expectation is it's going to be built to town standards before the town accepts it.
Glenn, could I just ask, just for clarification, a private road, as we're discussing it here, you keep mentioning the subdivision. Is this the application of the term private road is only related to a subdivision? Or are there private roads? As earlier in the discussion, we were talking about private roads can exist in a lot of different places.
Yeah, they can. I think.
Does my question make it, you understand my question?
I do. I think new private roads would generally be established when somebody is creating lots along it. People generally don't just go out in the woods and build a private road.
Right.
They would seek some sort of blessing for this private road because they were planning on cutting off lots along it. And that's now where the commission gets involved into ensuring that it's got appropriate access, et cetera.
No,
So that's,
go
ahead.
So somebody, so say somebody buys a piece of property and they have a very long driveway.
Yep.
And they decide to sell lots, or, I mean, does that then become a private road or is it still their driveway?
No, I think,
Only have 2 lots off of a driveway. Any more,
Okay.
than that, it becomes a road.
Okay,
and I think that's the situation, Alice.
okay.
As I explained early on in the
I
process, I
knew
think
there
the
had to be a
commission's role.
limitation. Yeah, okay.
Commission's role is consumer protections. For somebody who's going to buy one of those lots, they need to know that they have access rights. And it
Gotcha.
either needs to be an easement, as Wes indicated, on a private driveway, or it needs to be a private or a public road. Otherwise, they may be landlocked in the future, and that's clearly what nobody wants.
Yeah, gotcha.
So unless, of course, it's an abandoned road. And then that's a whole.
Oh, that's a
set-
whole different, yeah, we're not getting into that. That's, I can see Rick shaking his head. He doesn't want to hear about those, right? And then comment number 26 here as well, is that the default provision in 4A 2A had been to provide for roads to be extended. And I think suggested a changing of that wording that the commission may require rather than the commission shall require.
I think that's a good change.
So that's it, I think, for page 6. For page 7. Okay, so that comment number 30 is the same as what we talked about before. See the prior page. Got it. We had a comment about sightline distance. Denise Lord had indicated that the state standard is a sightline to be measured at least 15 feet from the edge of the intersection road. Denise had suggested it be moved to 20 feet from the travelway. Oh, hang on a second. I got this backwards. Yeah. So the current text was written at 20 feet. Denise had suggested 15 feet, and Rick got back and said he preferred the 20 feet. And really what we're talking about here is that at intersections, and particularly as vegetation grows up, et cetera, over time, that people can see on the roadway before they pull out into traffic. So I think if I understand Rick's position here, that the suggestion here would be to stay at 20 feet.
Right.
Yeah, that's better, yeah.
I mean, driveway's fine, but for a road, I would rather see 20 feet.
Yep.
I agree with that.
Comment number 32 is to insert language that the commission may require road continuation of the property line. The regulation's been set up to say that the road shall be extended to the property line. And I think this gives the commission the ability to decide in particular situations whether to allow a road to stop before the property line or whether to continue it, but doesn't mandate that it has to.
Skip Mountain School, 1898.
We good?
Good.
So comment number 33 is a comment about an island in the center of a cul-de-sac. So we had talked about this a little bit, and I think Rick had expressed a strong interest in having clear places to be able to put the snow.
Yeah,
But a cul-de-sac can be 100-foot radius of pavement. And so some municipalities allow for a center island in the cul-de-sac. And that center island allows the truck to pile snow in the cul-de-sac. In some towns, what the truck does is goes through and does the inside first. So most of the snow ends up in the cul-de-sac and then does the outside of the cul-de-sac and then continues on their way. So the question in a sense is, as a rural community, is Kent interested in allowing center islands in cul-de-sacs? Thoughts, feedback? Rick, how do you feel?
I think I answered that to you before, that if there was no curbing, then we could just push snow straight in, fine.
right.
And no plantings other than, you know,
So that's a good
flowers
point.
or something that if we ran them over, oh well, but.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a landscaping issue. Just as long as they can put snow on it, I can understand the maintenance.
Okay,
And we do have one right currently at the end of Chimney Rock where there's a big grass area in the center or the end of the road with a big yew bush in it that we can't do anything except push a little bit of snow there, otherwise it's hitting the truck, so.
yeah, so I think, Rick, the center island, given the dimensions we're talking about, would generally be at least 40 feet across. So
Okay,
it's a pretty good size scenario.
Right.
as long as they didn't have curb around it, we would be
Yep.
okay doing.
Yep, and so I wrote that down. I'll add that, I'll go ahead and add that in.
Right.
Section 4A9 of the regulations provides for temporary dead ends. And this would occur in a situation where the road is to be extended onto adjacent property. But it does get fairly prescriptive in terms of the way this would be configured. And in a rural community like Kent, wanted to ask the commission if they feel this is overkill and we should get rid of section 4A9. If somebody's going to propose a road extended to the property line, commission can work out the details as part of the plan. I'm not sure we need section 4A9 to get into this much detail. Seems like more of a suburban scenario.
So I agree with that. The road should be what the road is.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know why we don't need to have that.
Wait a minute. If there's two separate parcels owned by the same person, right? And they can afford to subdivide and develop the one parcel, but are hoping to subdivide and develop the other parcel, but they don't have any access to that other parcel, there should be an opportunity for them to have a temporary dead end and then extend that road in the future.
Yeah, and I think in the scenario you described, Matt, that's exactly what would happen. The subdivider would leave a right of way or take a temporary cul-de-sac to the property line, and they would need to demonstrate to the commission and to Rick and others that there is a cul-de-sac there, which will allow people to turn around, provide place for snow piling, etc. The issue gets a little bit more delicate if two different people own those properties. And so Wes is subdividing his property and you're the next property behind his. You would like access from Wes to access your landlocked property. And so the question, in the way the regs are currently required, Wes has to according to this, provide access to you.
Yeah, but that's done by just a right of way. If you have a cul-de-sac, you have a meets and bounds that has a 100-foot radius on it.
It does, but if the cul-de-sac or the turnaround west is built in the middle of the parcel, that Matt can't get to it, he doesn't have a road. He doesn't have access to it.
But I didn't have access in the first place.
Correct. And that's why the language that suggesting here would, under comment number 32, may require road continuation to the property line or not. Commission can decide. But all of the language about how a temporary dead end would be constructed and configured, I think the commission can work that out on the fly. So I think 30.
Yeah, 32 covers it.
I think it
Based on
does.
that, I concur.
Okay.
Glenn, in 32, when you say may require of whom or what?
For the subdivider, the
Subdivider.
commission may
This one-
require the subdivider to
Right.
continue the road to the property line. And then they
Right.
say, well, I don't want to do it. I don't want to spend the money.
Right.
And the issue is the town may decide that, this is an important aspect and you can
Right.
require that to happen.
Okay.
What is temporary? How long is temporary?
Yeah,
I mean, what we're talking about is, it could be 20 years.
right.
Yeah, it could be. Could be longer.
It could be forever.
The temporary is it's maybe not temporary.
Right.
Well, yeah, so I think the
About
idea,
Silent Ridge, this.
there you go.
So
We have
does
on there.
temporary actually imply it's not town responsible? Is that what it means?
No.
Is that,
So
No.
generally, the word temporary cul-de-sac is used to describe a situation that there is a road going in servicing properties. The road may be continued at some time in the future, but we don't know when that is. So therefore, we need to have a bulb at the end of the road for traffic to be able to turn around, for Rick to be able to plow it, for fire department engines to be able to turn around on this roadway. And should that road be extended in the future, if it's no longer temporary, the general requirement would be that the asphalt is caught up and taken up outside of the cul-de-sac so that the road now just appears to be a roadway going straight through. I don't think we need a couple of paragraphs in the subdivision regs explaining that. We're going to work that out as part of the subdivision that, the next person who is coming along is going to restore the area and get
Right,
rid of the
that's-
cul-de-sac turnaround.
That's way too complicated. And they can always apply for modification.
Okay,
So I
we're-
think-
we can get rid of 4A9.
Like a civilian,
Correct.
Okay.
civilian wouldn't be a military war, but it looks like a military.
So the comment was made that the number of lots accessing the turnaround might be more than 2. It could be up to 4. And I think Rick has expressed some concerns about the number of lots that actually do access the turnaround because that limits the location where he could pile snow. Does the commission have a preference in terms of number of lots accessing the turnaround?
So two could be generous. 4 is too much. I mean, I could go with 3.
Does it partially depend on the size of the turnaround?
Of course it does. And the lay of the land.
There's
Yeah,
a great big turnaround,
right.
But the way we measure lot frontage at the turnaround is really what matters as to how many lots you can get there. And so it's quite possible that you might have a lot which has a little bit of the turnaround, but it's also got a section of its frontage along the straight portion of the road.
Correct, that's right.
And I think what we're saying is, okay, well, listen, for Rick to be able to pile snow, up to 3 could be okay. And if there's another lot, then the issue is their driveway needs to be on the straight portion, not on the curved portion. And they just need to design it to make that work.
You're right. The road exposure length dictates it. So if I'm envisioning a circle, you've got one that takes one on one side, one on the other. It takes part of the road for its length, and then the
Yep.
center. So that's three. You have the two sides and the end.
Does that sound good, everybody?
Sure.
The next question was, does the commission want to have the ability to require street trees? There was some language in your current regulations having to do with landscaping, but there was never a requirement, and some towns say, you know, 1 tree per 100 feet of road distance, or if there's existing vegetation there already, that suffices. But if, you know, there's no vegetation, the commission could require trees. What's your thought on this one?
That was Jean Johnson, is she still alive, or how is she doing?
You know, I see its value. You know, we're here in Kent and we have a lot of trees.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
trying
so
to
it's
envision
a
a
special
subdivision-
permit necessarily to say that the commission may require trees by
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think Rick requested that any trees planted be 20 feet back from the travelway. And that way they're not going to provide hazard to traffic or impinge, you know, on the roadway over time. Anything else on page 7?
That is Forestburg.
I think on page 8, most of these are just, again, observations, make changes, comments from Mike and Rick and Denise. Page 9 has to do some comments here with regard to application procedures. Mike and I have been going around on the issue about a property owner enabling access to the property. And I think the scenarios are that the commission needs to have the ability to visit the subdivision if necessary, to review the proposed improvements and make sure that they're comfortable approving it based on what they see in the field. So we got to get access, and what we said here was mutually agreeable times to evaluate the proposed subdivision. If the property owner says no, I think the commission can deny it because they're don't have the information at their disposal. I think if the commission has approved a subdivision and they're building public improvements, the commission should have the right to enter the property at any time to inspect the road or drainage construction. And the commission's agent in this situation could be Rick, but he wants to make sure that, you know, for a town road, that the base is installed correctly and everything else, because we could end up owning that road later. So we need to have access then at that time. Excuse me. And the third scenario is a situation that the subdivision improvements have not been completed on a timely basis. The commission may need to call the financial guarantee and complete the improvements. That's what the bond or the financial guarantee is all about. We certainly need the right to enter the property at any time to go ahead and complete those improvements if the owner has not.
Well, there needs to
So,
be time associated with that.
I'm sorry, what was that, Wes?
Be a time associated with that, right? If after
Yeah, so the
6 months or some period of time.
correct. The subdivider has 5 years to complete the improvements.
Oh, okay.
Mike has made an observation that if the current draft of the regulation said that the town cannot issue a certificate of occupancy if the road hasn't been completed or the improvements haven't been bonded. And Mike's observation is that subdivision regulations can't dictate a certificate of occupancy by the building official. They're really two separate things. And Mike's point is, if somebody is requesting a certificate of occupancy and either the road is not completed or we do not have an adequate financial guarantee, then that might be a situation that further action could or should be taken.
I see. Right.
question is notice provisions with regard to a proposed subdivision. The commission has generally relied on published legal notices, a notice to the land use registry, and a sign on the property. Does the commission have any thoughts or desire in terms of anything else that they may want to do? Notifying abutters, for example, or other things like that?
I think we should have the zoning enforcement officer or someone notify the bordering properties, because there's lots of folks that don't read public legal notices, and sometimes signs disappear. I think
Yeah,
I think it would be helpful to have a written notice if your neighbor is going to start doing a subdivision.
sure. I mean, it's required for Board of Appeals, so why shouldn't we also require? I think you're right.
So the onus of that in Board of Appeals and in the historical commission and is on the applicant. The applicant has to send certified mail to those designated neighbors.
Mm.
I mean, that's the way it's done right now, and I
That's right. And
We have-
give proof that they sent it. Yeah, that's right.
yes, and they don't have to prove that it was received. They have to prove that it was sent.
Correct.
Correct.
So
And,
in that case, in your current regulations, for the ZBA, you require, the certified mailing to abutters, but you don't require the sign. So you're saying for subdivisions, you'd like to require the works.
Yeah,
So for your special permits, you require the sign, you require the public registry, and you require the notice into the newspaper. For ZBA, you require the notice into the newspaper and the notice to the abutters by certified mail. And we always do the public registry through the clerk's office for everything. So this one, I think what I'm hearing is you want a combination of everything.
It sounds like that's what, yes, it sounds like that's the consensus, Ty.
Okay.
Is that, is that burdensome for you in the office?
It's not burdensome, it's costly, and we've talked about with the selectmen of maybe increasing the fees, because all of these things have fees associated with them, signs and certified mailings and
But
you know,
they're-
notices to the
Right, they're not
newspaper and all
done-
that, but I think you should do what you think is best, and then we work out the costs somewhere else.
when I've had to do that in the past, it was on me. I had to, the costs were mine as the applicant or my clients as the applicant. And I had to bring to the land use office, proof of the certified mail going out by a certain date.
good.
I agree with that. The signs we've
wasn't-
been purchasing ourselves out of the land use budget. So
I don't think I think that should be on the applicant too, though. I don't think
I-
that.
I
that we
agree.
should
It's
be
just, we're in a trap with the fee schedules right now where you can't change the fees without the town ordinance being changed. So we haven't updated fees in 20 years. So again, I really think that you guys should do what you think is right, and we'll work out the other part in a separate matter.
There you go.
So I think that the consensus is that the signs and the legal notice postings and the postings that you do in the town hall through the clerk stay under the costs of this commission. And we'll try to work out the fees with an updated ordinance. I know you're working on that with the select board. But with regard to the mailings, I think that we can write this, that it's at the expense of the applicant.
You're right. It's the applicant's obligation to do this, so that there's a technical defect or they miss somebody, it's on them, not on the town.
Right.
It also, honestly, it is time consuming, and we
Yeah, it is.
put that on Ty to take that on. It's a serious pain in the butt, so
Sure.
should be
I
on the
mean,
applicant.
Yep.
I mean, there may be 30 abutters.
Right.
Okay, so that was page 9. Page 10, it's all sort of make change. There is a discuss with PZC at the bottom, but this is also the issue about signs and notice. So we just talked about that. So I think we can move on unless anybody have anything else on page 10.
Glenn, I would like to, I'm sorry to be late to the party, but with regard to street trees, all the way
Yep.
back at 4A12, can we make a provision that if we do ask for street trees or do require street trees, that they be native?
Yes, good point. Thank you.
Wow, you were stewing over that.
I was going back and forth and trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to say. But,
I think that's a good ad.
Yeah, I do too.
Thank you, Matt.
welcome.
So I think I have us now at page 11. And I think, yeah, the only suggestion here, again, to incorporate the other comments, and just to, in terms of Mike Zis's comments, talk about road improvements or other public improvements. There could be situations that public improvements are being made, not just road improvements, offsite drainage, things like that. So loop both of those in together. Commission okay with that?
Yes.
Yes.
So the next one has to do with the kind of a funky provision of Connecticut state law. Now, this goes back to, must have been the 1980s when interest rates went to, prime rate went to 20%, et cetera, et cetera. The legislature adopted a provision for what's called conditional approval of a subdivision. And this is where a subdivider is allowed to file a map, and he doesn't have to go get financing for road construction and post a bond for it. He can work away at road construction over time. And the only limitation or prohibition is that he can't sell any lots because there's no financial guarantee in place. There comes a point in time where maybe enough work has been completed that only a modest bond is required, et cetera. So that's what a conditional approval is. It's this special case that no financial guarantee would need to be filed. The statute is worded funny. And Mike suggested that the conditional approval delete the words of any at the end of any 5-year period. And he says state law does not allow for continued renewals. I went back and read the statute, and it said that the commission can. So the conditional approval shall lapse 5 years from the date it's granted, provided the applicant may apply for and the commission may grant a renewal for an additional period of 5 years at the end of any 5-year period. Mike's thought was, well, no, most subdivisions you have to be completed. You get 5 years and then 1 5-year extension. But this statute, this says any 5-year extension. So my suggestion for the commission is to, and I'm comfortable with whatever way the commission wants to go here, but a conditional approval could allow for 5 years to complete. You can then grant another 5-year extension, but you don't have to grant any more after that if you don't want, or you could just say, hey, shorter period of time, no extensions, et cetera.
So
What's
I'm
the-
putting a time factor to it.
Pardon me, what was that, Wes? You'd like,
I like putting a time factor to it.
so what would that be?
I would be comfortable with eliminating, right now, 5B ends with at the end of any 5-year period, Glenn, as you just pointed out with
Mhm.
regard to what the statute says. So if we got rid of at the end of any 5-year period and simply said such conditional approval for an additional period of up to 5 years.
Okay.
Then that would be the initial 5 years, and then anything up to 5 years, and then that's it. Then that gives people, 5
So that
plus, no more than 10.
Gives them 10 years total, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Up
Okay,
to 10
got
years.
it.
Okay, good.
So the provision in the regulations allowed for minor modifications. This could be Rick is out in the field and they're going to make a small adjustment in the pitch of the drainage pipe or something else. And Mike wasn't really comfortable with that because the authority to approve a subdivision rests with the commission. And he suggested that the language be unless modified in writing by the commission. So sometimes out in the field, things happen. But I think that, bringing this back to the commission is probably legally, technically correct, as Mike has pointed out. Commission okay with that?
Yes, it's onerous, but it is correct.
Yeah, and I
Yes.
think if it's a minor matter, work that out in the field. So on page 13, these are all again sort of make changes technical and otherwise. Page 14. Yeah, so I think this is the issue here, which is an interesting one. Mike's indicating that he doesn't think any certificate of occupancy should be given before completion of the road. I think I'd like the chance to talk to Mike about this again. I think there can be a situation where the binder course is down. We don't want to put the finish course down on the road because future construction on adjacent lots may, backhoes and other things like that chew up the pavement. And as long as we have a financial guarantee in place that the roadway will be built, we can go ahead and call it at the appropriate time. Mike's suggestion here that issuance of a CO triggers calling the financial guarantee seems a little drastic to me.
So
Says
could we
here.
put in except as modified by the commission? In other words, they would come in for a modification or a plan anyway in place?
That's a good point, Wes. So let me talk about, talk to Mike. I think what that certainly should
Or be
trigger
before the completion
is
of
a
the road.
review of the sufficiency of the financial guarantee. If for whatever reason, construction costs have escalated significantly and the financial guarantee may or may not be enough to complete the construction, we would say, you know what? You can have the CO provided that the financial guarantee is updated to current dollars.
Does
What-
that,
Go ahead, Ann.
does that pose a safety issue if the road isn't completed
They can't
as
live in.
far as fire apparatus being able to access a resident?
They can't be living in it.
Well, if they're applying for a modification to that, then all of those facts would be brought up during that modification.
Yeah, let me talk to Mike on this one because his point, Mike's legal point is the subdivision, if you had a separate planning commission in Kent and a separate zoning commission, the subdivision regulations are a construct for a planning commission, whereas a zoning permit and a certificate of occupancy is a construct of a zoning commission. So you can't have the planning commission telling the zoning commission what to do on this. I mean, your regulations need to be consistent. So the point here may be that we need to have a companion in the zoning regulations.
I can totally see where, this could be onerous. I could, if you were doing a subdivision and 10 houses and you have a road and you're not financially ready to finish the road, but you build the first house, the beginning of the road. It's not a safety hazard necessarily. There's easy access. Why require the builder to finish the next 500 yards of road when they've built one at the very beginning?
Yeah, so I think
just
the condition would be binder. Go ahead, Rick.
My issue with this is if the subdivision permit is issued to a builder, contractor, whatever, and people come in and start building houses, the CO is probably going to issue to that person. So that person's not responsible for the road, the builder is. So where do we, how are we going to be financially guaranteed by, unless they're all spec houses, that the road's going to get completed?
So my thought, Rick, is that I think we would want to do a review of the sufficiency of the financial guarantee. We'd want to require that the binder course be down to at least as far as the road. I think at that point in time, and the drainage is functional. And then we've got a bond for the remainder. So we were able to provide basic municipal services in that situation. And if for whatever reason the fire access or the drainage is not functioning, then the commission would call the bond. And just the threat to call the bond is going to wake up everybody and get that taken care of. So I think I can figure out a way to make this work. And I'll just talk to Rick and Mike about that.
Okay,
Good?
Yep.
I don't think there's anything on the next page in terms of making changes. And that brings us to the waiver issue. So this is the last 3 pages here of the material I've prepared for you. And this is an interesting situation. Mike and I have agreed to disagree on the meaning provision in the statutes. There's no question that this particular statutory language is not clearly worded. I was early in my career as a town planner when this public act came into fruition. And the concept at that time was, for a zoning commission, we have a zoning board of appeals that looks at situations of hardship and decides whether or not to grant a variance. There is no similar construct for a planning commission and the subdivision requirements. So the statutes were modified, in my understanding at that time, to allow the commission to waive their own regulations under specific circumstances. However, Mike noticed that in this particular paragraph, the only time that the word commission is used, it refers to the zoning commission. So he believes that the statute gives the planning commission the ability to waive a zoning regulation. And went back and looked at the legislative history on this. I just don't agree with Mike. I understand why and how he came to his conclusion, but there has been quite a lot of court activity with commissions modifying zoning regulations on the fly. And it just seems to me even more remote that the statutes would allow for a planning commission to modify the zoning regulations. I realize in Kent, the commissions are the same. But I think the concept here in this language is that should there be a requirement, let's say it has something to do with some standard related to open space or roads or drainage or something else, the commission can look at that situation and evaluate it on a factual basis, and decide rather than, let's say, a 10% slope on the road, they would allow an 11% slope, which would resolve the issue about, blasting or impact on neighbors, et cetera. But I don't believe that this would allow the commission, for example, to waive a lot frontage or a setback or other sort of zoning requirement. So I guess I'm proposing and advocating for a narrower conclusion than what Mike had. And I would like to craft this language to say that the commission can modify the provisions of the subdivision regulations. If somebody wants a modification of the zoning regulation, then either the zoning regulations have to provide for that or they have to go to the ZBA.
Right, right.
Is the commission okay with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. We're done. So my proposal would be,
So that means that planning and zoning stays the same commission.
well, I think that issue, if it were to come up, Alice, would be just, that'd be outside of my pay grade or whatever at this point in time. But I
hope so.
I think this keeps everybody in their proper lanes, kind
Yeah.
of moving forward.
Right.
And again, I think it makes it clear cut.
Right.
So my proposal now, we have a meeting. I think our next meeting is, Ty, is it the 16th?
Yep, the Thursday after next.
Yep. And so that meeting is, we're going to be talking about the conservation development regulations. And then in the meantime, I will be making changes to the subdivision regulations to reflect what we've got here. It is possible I will have the revisions ready sometime next week, in which case we might, depending on how the meeting goes on the 16th, may have an opportunity to discuss this. But what you will receive back from me would be a redline version of the subdivision regulations. So by redline, what I mean is that the existing text in the proposed regulations would be black, and any changes I've made based on all of these comments here would show up in red. It's the same approach that we used on the prior zoning regulation changes, et cetera. And then that would allow us to see everything in context, and when the commission's ready, give them the tools for moving ahead. So Ty, I guess what I would request is the next agenda include both items in case we get there. And my hope is that we will. But if not, then we'll carry the subdivision regulations forward to a meeting after that. Does that sound good?
Okay.
Got it. Back to you, Matt.
Just so that I understand where we need to be for the end of February.
Yep.
How does it work? When do we need to finalize the subdivision regulations in order to schedule a town meeting, in order to get them approved and in place before the moratorium ends?
So I think there's no requirement for a town meeting. There is a requirement for a public hearing. So I think the idea would be that it's possible that on the 16th, if the commission's ready and the regs are ready, everything looked good, we could go then, or if we don't get to this until the meeting in December, we could, and set the public hearing for December or January. And then go ahead and adopt the regulations before the end of the moratorium. So I think we're on schedule. Do you feel comfortable with that, Ty?
Yeah, I mean, I think traditionally a month to 6 weeks just to get all the noticing to everybody who needs to, the cogs and, all the proper clerks and people. And then have that public hearing. So I feel like between 4 and 6 weeks is enough time to get all that done. after you
think-
have a final version.
I think the Thanksgiving to New Year's window is not a great time to be having a public hearing on the
No,
adoption of
you're right.
subdivision regs. So I think if we give green light sometime, let's say in the next 30 to 45 days, that would allow us to get the public hearing sometime in January.
That's a good
That should work well.
And we would have the public hearing, and if we were comfortable, the commission would vote on those regulations at that or after that public hearing, or when we, after we close the public hearing, we could make that, we could hold that vote.
Or if, depending on the nature and extent of the comments, we could do a similar thing, put together a list, if you will, just like we did here tonight, and then come back at a subsequent meeting. So if we were to shoot for, let's say, maybe mid-January for the public hearing, if we needed to, we could have a meeting a week or two later and finalize it then and be completed before February even begins. So that's a possibility, Matt.
And then after the vote, Ty, what's the waiting period before they go into effect?
I'm pretty sure it's just the 15 that you post it in the paper, and it's the 15-day appeals period, and then, file them with the clerk.
Fine.
Yeah, and
So-
I think we should check with Mike on that, Ty, because I
Okay.
think the issue is that I think the statutes say that the effective date of the regulations has to be after publication of the notice, but I don't believe you need to wait the 15 days.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
That's
so
even
somebody
better.
the regulations go into effect, somebody could appeal a week or two later, but that means the regulations are still in effect while the appeal is going on. So
I'll double
we'll
check.
work. Yep. and
So the
we'll work
15
those-
days is worst case scenario.
Correct.
Okay.
Fine. This commission is probably not going to be interested in having a second or third meeting in December. So I think it's a good idea to try to get through this on the 16th, along with the conservation subdivision regulations. That way you can make whatever changes we have to, and we can have a public meeting in mid-January. Okay, fine. That sounds right to me.
Good.
Perfect.
And then one other thought, Glenn, when we are looking at the conservation subdivision regulations, the way we, as part of that, I just want to confirm that the way we calculate the number of lots that are allowed in a subdivision is clearly laid out in our zoning regs, right? So let's at least be prepared to have a quick discussion about how that calculation is made for when we are talking about it on the 16th.
Yeah, so I think it's spelled out in the conservation development regulation. And so we'll talk through that methodology. I think our discussion here tonight in terms of the open space percentage and the proportionality factor is going to tie into that as well. And I think those are the main constructs for how the application would come together. So yeah, we'll be ready to talk about that on the 16th.
That's great. And on the 16th, are we expecting to see some new information regarding the conservation subdivision? Are we going to go back to what we the last that we reviewed this before our summer hiatus?
I think that the latest version, I believe that I have, Ty, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe it's May 8 is the most recent version of the text. And we were discussing elements of that as we got into the summertime, and we talked through this version at several meetings and then decided to put everything on hold for the remainder of the summer, now pick up in the fall. So I believe the latest version is May 8. And I think, Ty, if you would, if you'd send it out to the commission members again so that they know it's the latest version, then we're good to go. Thank you.
Great.
Perfect.
Okay. I think I'm satisfied. Everybody else is ready to
Good.
fill the information they need.
Good. Motion to adjourn.
There you go.
Thanks, Wes. All right, thanks everybody for joining. It's nice to have a full commission almost.
And see you in 2 weeks.
All right.
I hope to see all of you in 2 weeks.
We'll see you in 1 week, Adam.
That's right.
Thanks, everybody. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.